There's a certain kind of man who walks into a room and lowers the temperature. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't fill the silence. He just watches calm, still, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And somehow that makes people nervous. You've probably met him. Maybe you married him. Maybe you are him. At some point, someone called him cold, calculating, a little bit villainous. Here's what almost nobody realizes. That reputation isn't an accident. And the man wearing it? He's not offended by it. He secretly enjoys it. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the INTJ personality type gets cast as the villain again and again, and why, deep down, that misunderstanding is the most comfortable disguise he's ever worn. The INTJ is one of the rarest personalities on Earth. Roughly 2% of people, even rarer among women. And across every culture, every era, every story we tell, this type keeps showing up in the same role. The mastermind, the strategist, the quiet architect standing behind the throne, not on it. Think about the fiction you love, the chess-playing genius, the one who always has a plan, the character who's 3 moves ahead while everyone else reacts. Writers reach for that archetype constantly, and they almost always paint him as the antagonist. This personality comes from the work of Isabel Briggs Myers, building on the ideas of the psychiatrist Carl Jung. INTJ stands for introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging. Myers called this type the architect, someone who lives to build systems, solve problems, and see the whole board. But here's the strange part. The exact traits that make him brilliant are the same traits that make people uneasy. His calm, his precision, his refusal to perform emotion he doesn't feel. We're going to walk through 7 reasons the world keeps casting the INTJ as the villain and why he quietly, almost gleefully, lets it happen. Let's start with the one that surprises almost everyone. His stillness is the first thing people misread. Most of us fidget. We fill silence, we soften our faces, we signal that we're safe. The INTJ doesn't do that. He stays composed when everyone else is rattled, and that composure gets mistaken for something sinister. Isabel Myers described the architect as internally anchored, driven by an inner vision rather than the mood of the room. In psychology, we know humans instinctively read a lack of emotional mirroring as danger. When someone doesn't flinch when we expect them to, our nervous system flags it. Why isn't he reacting? What does he know that I don't? So the INTJ isn't being menacing. He's just not performing panic to make you comfortable. And to a man like this, that reaction is fascinating rather than hurtful. He notices his silence has weight. He notices people recalibrate around him. But his calm is only the surface. What's actually happening inside that quiet mind is where it gets genuinely fascinating. The INTJ lives in the future. His dominant mental process is something Carl Jung called introverted intuition. In plain terms, it's a pattern recognition engine that runs in the background, constantly forecasting where things are heading. He doesn't just see the situation in front of him, he sees the version of it that arrives 6 months from now. This is why he seems to always know how things will end. He'll warn you about the friend who'll betray you, the plan that'll collapse, the shortcut that'll cost you. And when he's right again, it doesn't feel like insight to the people around him. It feels like he engineered it. That's the villain illusion in a nutshell. Foresight looks identical to scheming from the outside. And the INTJ knows exactly how that looks. He stopped explaining, which, of course, only makes him look more like the man behind the curtain. Now, here's where it gets a little more complicated, because this next trait cuts both ways. The INTJ will tell you the truth, not to hurt you, not to win. He simply finds comfortable lies genuinely useless. If your idea has a flaw, he'll name it. If the plan is weak, he'll say so often before you've finished pitching it. In the Big Five model of personality developed by researchers Costa and McCrae, this maps onto something called low agreeableness. It doesn't mean a person is unkind. It means they prioritize accuracy over approval. They'd rather give you something true than something pleasant. But most people don't experience blunt honesty as care. They experience it as an attack. So the man who's actually respecting you enough to be straight with you gets remembered as the harsh one, the difficult one. Here's the quiet tragedy in that. He only bothers being blunt with people he takes seriously. The ones he's given up on get polite nothing. And that misunderstanding bleeds straight into the next one, the one the people closest to him get wrong most often. Because he rarely shows emotion, people assume there's nothing underneath. This is maybe the deepest misread of all. The neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett has shown that emotions aren't simply things that happen to us. They're constructed and regulated by the brain. Some people run that regulation loud and visible. Others run it silent and internal. The INTJ runs it almost entirely inward. So the feeling is there. The love is there. The hurt is absolutely there. It just doesn't leak out onto his face for public inspection. He processes it privately, files it, and moves on, and the world reads that stillness as emptiness. For the man himself, this one actually stings. He feels things deeply and gets accused of feeling nothing. But instead of protesting, he lets people believe the myth. Because a man they think is unfeeling is a man they can't hurt. If you're the kind of person who looks at someone the whole world calls cold and thinks, no, there's something more going on here, then you already understand this type better than most people ever will. It would genuinely mean a lot if you hit subscribe. We put out videos like this every week, real psychology, explained in a way that actually makes sense. Now, let's get into the part almost nobody talks about, because being cast as the villain isn't free. Here's the cost no one sees. When you're the person who's usually right, who reads the room too well, who calls the outcome before it arrives, people slowly pull away. Not out of hatred, out of discomfort. The psychologist Kipling Williams spent decades studying ostracism, the quiet pain of being excluded. His research found that social rejection lights up the same neural regions as physical injury. The brain doesn't distinguish much between a broken bone and being left out. And the INTJ gets left out constantly, not for doing wrong, but for being unsettling to be around. So he learns to expect the distance. He builds a life that doesn't depend on being included. He tells himself he prefers the solitude, and sometimes he genuinely does. But make no mistake, the villain role has a price. Every time someone decides he's the cold one, a door quietly closes. And he's felt every single one of them close. Which brings us to the real question. If it costs him this much, why on earth does he secretly love it? To understand why he enjoys the reputation, you have to go back to where it started. Most INTJs were the strange kid. Too logical, too intense, too quick to notice what adults were pretending not to. They learned early that being fully seen usually meant being corrected, mocked, or managed. So they did something clever. They stopped letting people all the way in. Carl Jung had a name for the face we show the world to protect the self underneath. He called it the persona, a mask worn not to deceive, but to survive. For the INTJ, the villain persona became the perfect armor. If people think you're cold and dangerous, they stop trying to pry you open. Do you see the genius of it? The reputation that isolates him also protects him. Fear keeps people at a distance, and distance is exactly where he feels safest. The mask that makes him a villain in their story makes him untouchable in his own. That's why he loves it. Not because he's evil, because the disguise finally lets him breathe. But there's one last truth underneath the mask, and honestly, it's the most important thing in this entire video. Strip away the reputation, and here's what's actually there. The INTJ doesn't give his loyalty easily, but when he chooses you, when he decides you're one of the rare few worth the effort, that decision is close to permanent. Attachment researchers, going back to the work of John Bowlby, have shown that the deepest bonds aren't built on constant expression. They're built on reliability, on showing up, on being the steady thing that doesn't move when everything else does. And steadiness is the INTJ's native language. He won't flood you with words. He'll do something better. He'll remember the problem you mentioned once and quietly solve it. He'll build the plan that protects your future. He'll be 3 moves ahead, not to control you, but to guard you. The man the world calls the villain is, more often than not, the most devoted architect in the room. He just builds in silence for an audience of one. So the next time you meet a man everyone calls cold, calculating, a little bit villainous look again, you're not looking at someone who feels nothing. You're looking at someone who feels everything and learned a long time ago that showing it wasn't safe. You're looking at foresight mistaken for scheming, honesty mistaken for cruelty, a shield mistaken for a heart of stone. He isn't a villain. He's an architect who got tired of explaining himself, so he let the world write his story wrong, because the wrong story kept him safe. And the rare people who look past the reputation, who see the loyalty under the armor, they don't just get to know him, they get the most steadfast person they'll ever have. If this hit close to home, I made a video on why the smartest people are so often the loneliest, and I think it'll land just as hard. It's right here when you're ready.